Today, we're diving into the one thing that turns a bunch of smart people into a team that just wins. We're talking about accountability. It's this secret ingredient for high performance, and we're going to break down exactly how you can build it.
So, let me ask you this. What really separates a good team from a truly great one? I mean, is it just about having the biggest budget, or hiring the most talented people, or just getting lucky? We've all seen teams with all of that stuff completely fail to deliver. The real answer? Well, it's a lot simpler and way more powerful.
It's accountability. It's that deep, personal sense of ownership where every single person on the team feels responsible, not just for their little slice of the pie, but for the whole outcome. When a team has this, wow, they become a force of nature. And when it's missing, things start to fall apart, and they fall apart fast.
And that leads us to what I call the accountability gap. It's that frustrating place where confusion lives and momentum just dies. For any growing business, closing this gap isn't just a nice to have. It can literally be the difference between scaling up and just burning out.
Do any of these sound a little too familiar? Deadlines are always slipping. Two people suddenly realize they've been working on the exact same thing, while some other critical task was completely ignored. The founders are pulling all-nighters just to keep the train on the tracks, and whenever something goes wrong, the first question is always, okay, who dropped the ball, instead of, how do we fix this? Yeah, that's the chaos of the accountability gap.
But hey, the good news is there's a clear way out of this mess. We don't have to reinvent the wheel here. We can actually just look at how some of the world's most successful companies have systematically built these amazing cultures of ownership. And their lessons, they're surprisingly simple.
Let's start with Apple. They use this really powerful but simple system called the DRI, which stands for Directly Responsible Individual. The idea is that for every single action item, one person's name is put next to it. That's it. This completely gets rid of that bystander effect, where everyone just assumes someone else is going to handle it. Nope. With the DRI, it is crystal clear who owns what.
Okay, now let's hop over to Netflix. They take a different angle, but it's just as powerful. Their whole philosophy is built around this idea of context, not control. They work on the belief that if you hire great people, you don't need to micromanage them, you need to trust them with the big picture. And this is where the magic happens. Instead of giving a team a rigid checklist of instructions, you give them a deep understanding of the goal, the why. Because when people see how their piece of the puzzle fits into that bigger picture, their own internal motivation just kicks in. They start holding themselves accountable to the outcome, which is so much more powerful than just checking a box.
And of course, we've got Amazon's famous two-pizza rule. The rule is simple. No team should be bigger than what two pizzas can feed. So why does this work so well? Well, think about it. In a small group like that, there's just nowhere to hide. Communication is quick, everyone sees what everyone else is doing, and that sense of personal ownership becomes almost automatic. It keeps the team incredibly fast and agile.
Okay, so we've seen the big ideas from the giants, but how do you actually make this happen with your own team right now? Let's get really practical with a simple 3-step blueprint for turning your team into a high-output machine. It really all comes down to these 3 pillars. Number 1, set super clear goals. Using frameworks like OKRs or KPIs, something that defines exactly what success looks like. Number 2, define every single role. We'll use a system called RACI for that, to kill any confusion. And number 3, make all the progress totally visible with shared tools.
Now for defining roles, the RACI matrix is going to be your new best friend. For any task, you figure out who is responsible. That's the person, or people, actually doing the work. But here's the key. Only one person is accountable. That's the single owner of the final outcome. Then you have people who are consulted for their input, and others who are just informed of what's going on. Zero ambiguity.
And finally, you make everything visible. You use simple visual tools, think Trello, Asana, stuff like that, to create what I call radical transparency. When everyone can see who owns what and where every task is, delays just pop up on their own. The system itself does the follow-up, which removes that awkward, emotional friction of a manager constantly having to ask, hey, what's the status on that? So having a blueprint is one thing, but making it actually stick, that's a whole different ballgame. The final piece of this puzzle is turning these processes into habits that are just baked into your team's DNA. This is how accountability stops being a system you use and starts becoming the culture you live. You embed this through a really simple, consistent rhythm, like a quick 15-minute huddle every morning to talk wins, roadblocks, and priorities. A weekly stand-up where you look at the key business dashboards together.
And regular feedback sessions that aren't about blame, they're about behavior. Asking, what did we own well and what can we do better next time?
And what this rhythm does, over time, is it fundamentally shifts the entire team's mindset. You move away from a culture of blame and into a culture of ownership. So instead of asking, whose fault is this? The team naturally starts asking, okay, what happened and how do we improve our process so it doesn't happen again? This creates real psychological safety, where people feel safe enough to raise their hand early when there's a problem. All right, so you've put in the work. You've implemented the systems, you've built the habits, you've shifted the mindset. So what's the actual payoff? What does this high output result really look and feel like in the real world?
Well, let's start with a hard number. Studies have shown that teams who really build this true culture of accountability see a productivity boost of 20 to 30%. Now just think about that for a second. That's like adding an entire extra day of focused work to every single week. That's a huge competitive advantage.
But you know, it's about so much more than just a number. It's a complete transformation. Founder burnout drops because that heavy weight is finally being shared. The team becomes proactive, solving problems before they even become crises. And you develop this incredible agility and speed that lets you run circles around bigger, slower competitors. You actually become a true high-output team.
So, as we wrap this up, I want to leave you with one question. Look, don't try to boil the ocean here. Just think about one small, simple thing you can do this week to create a little more clarity and a little more ownership. What is that very first step your team is going to own together?